friends, welcome to the Empowered Homes Podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to grow strong families by connecting church and home. And those of you who are listening on Apple, Spotify, we're just grateful that you are. Go ahead and subscribe. Meghan, we also have YouTube. Tell us about YouTube.
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel, Empowered Homes, and we hope that you will watch this so that you can watch and listen. So
yeah, so if
that's
you're
fun, right?
if you're listening on Spotify or whatever Apple or podcast platform, and you're like, man, I really want to watch what's happening in studio, it's on YouTube, right?
Yes.
So if you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to. We just want to open up more ways and avenues to get content to people. So
that's right.
We're grateful for all of our listeners, and we're excited. So today we'll jump into our conversation. We're going to talk about back to school. We're going to talk about, heading into a new school year with a lot of our kids, and we have an leading expert in studio, Ronnie Mosher. Mr. Mosher, is that what the kids call you?
That is what the kids call me.
Yeah. And we got Meghan here, who she's got kids in school. I've got kids in school, so we're just gonna have a conversation about school. But Ronnie, the reason we have you is what's your title?
I'm a principal.
Principal of an elementary school.
Yes, yes, sir.
So you are with kids and educators all day, every day, basically.
That is correct, yes. Yeah. I went to school just like everyone else did, went to college like everybody else did, and then I started working in school, so I've never left school.
Yeah, you've been there this whole time. So Ronnie, for the listener, tell us a little bit of your story and kind of how you got to where you're at today.
Okay, well, let me first tell you that I'm a husband and a dad. I've been married for 26 years. We've been together for nearly 30. I have a 17-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. You know them.
Yes, know them well.
I think you do too.
Yeah.
Sweet kids.
Both of them came all the way through my elementary school. I'm also a member here at the church. I've been here for 21 years in several ministries. I'm a deacon here. And I've been in education, elementary education specifically, for 22 years. I've been in 2 different districts, and I taught, when I was a teacher, I taught first, but mostly 3rd grade. And I was assistant principal for a few years, and for the last 15 years, I've been the principal at WoodCreek Elementary in Katy ISD.
So how long? Say that again.
15 years. So 15 years I've been at WoodCreek.
That's awesome.
Wow.
So we're bringing you on for the average listener that's mostly parents. We have a lot of parents who listen, who have younger kids. That's a big demographic. And so what we get with you today is we're going to pull back a little peek behind the curtain of what happens in the school system. And I know some listeners may homeschool, they may do different avenues of school, but specifically talking about public school today, I wanted to just pick your brain. And so before I give you the hard-hitting questions, a lot of times, and I think of it too, it's like, you're the principal of elementary school. The first thought is, why? What? But reality, you love your job. Tell us why you love your job.
I do love my job.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why, by the way, is because that's where God's put me.
Yeah.
He called me to be there. And that's one of the things I love about it. I mean, it's obedience. So that's why I'm there. But some of the things I love about it, though, is I get to help other people for a living. It's hard, which you have a sense of because you asked me why.
Yeah.
But it's also extremely meaningful. I am literally paid to do good deeds, and I love that.
Yeah. And for a lot of principals, would you say in your circles of friends, and would you say they have that same heart and desire for what they do?
You know, one of the things I look for, even when I'm hiring teachers and the principals that I know, is a passion for this. And the ones I know in Katy, absolutely, they have a passion for it. Anybody, I don't think someone could stay in education if they weren't called to it in some way.
Yeah. So it's for those we also have listeners who are ministry leaders too, pastors and such. They understand that calling, but it's awesome hearing you say that this is your calling as well. This is your ministry. You can't overtly, throw the Bible or preach, but you're sharing love of God in different avenues, and that's a beautiful thing. So I just want to say thanks for that. It just sets an example for all of us. Like, no matter what we do, if we're a lawyer or a teacher or whatever, like, God has called us into that world for those people, for that time and that season. So I love that that's your heart, and that's why I wanted to kind of pick your brain and let you share some insights for the parents listening of going, all right, what can I learn from teachers and educators that can help me have the best successful school year this next year? So one of the questions that kind of keeps popping up is, what are some things that you want all parents to know about education? So if you can get in front of all the parents and you just grab them by the shoulder and say, here's what I want you to know. What are a few things that you have?
Yeah, one of the things I share with my parents, and this is something they know, but it's good to recognize or say it out loud, and that is, nobody knows your child better than you do. And sometimes I think they get, they wonder if other people know that, and I want you to know that we know that. No one knows your child better than you. Also, you are your child's first and primary teacher. I really believe that. Now, the teacher knows your child in a way that you don't know them because they're in a different setting. I mean, they're in the education setting. And the teacher has some training that helps them to see, where kids are in their learning. So the teacher knows your child in a different way. And it's a way that you don't typically get to see. So that is why it is so important to be a trusted partner with that teacher. It only benefits your kid.
Yeah.
I love that. And, at Empowered Homes, we talk a lot about parents being the primary faith trainer. And I think you're right, that extends like primary teacher, right? Faith trainer, but also just like you are the primary influencer in their life. And so to remind them of that before they go into the school year is so important, like every year.
Yeah. Every year's an opportunity. And with our teachers of knowing, like, they do have influence. Like, for me as a parent, I know that it's funny, like, my daughter will call her teacher mom from time to time.
I've been called mom, and and I consider that an honor. When they call you mom,
because they spend so much time.
They feel safe.
But that doesn't negate the role of the parent as the primary teacher. Like, we know our kids so well, so good, but a lot of times we just, for lack of a better term or wording, we think, well, we're just going to drop off our kids. You take care of that. And how do we practically partner with our teachers in schools? Like, what are some tips for us to actively pursue that? Because if my kids are going to be spending time with an adult, as a parent, I want to know that adult. I want to know who's speaking life into them. But some parents don't have that. And so what are some tips that we can have to be partnering with parents and teachers too? Yeah.
It's a good question. I think before I give some tips, let me just make sure first we have kind of like a shared understanding.
Yeah.
It will help to understand what I'm about to tell you. So first, let's recognize that we're talking about your kids, and that's emotional. That's
a great point.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. Also, in relationships, problems are normal. Some people, I think, go in thinking that a good year would be that there's zero problems. And it's just good to point out that problems are normal.
That's good.
And, relationships that don't have problems, we call those acquaintances. And this work is way too important to just be acquaintances. We need relationships, deep relationships. And with deep relationships come problems. Now, problems are also the opportunities. So it's good to keep that in mind. Problems are the opportunities. I know problems will actually deepen the relationship. I don't know how to deepen relationships without the problem. So, what makes a functional relationship versus a dysfunctional relationship, I believe, is how you handle the problems. And so it's good to realize that and recognize that.
It's really good, yeah.
Okay, so some tips.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to partner with your teacher, it's so important by the way, I know this is tempting, by the way. It is so tempting, but it is so important not to engage in the gossip that happens. So when you find out who your teacher is, when you start to sense a problem, your child at the dinner table says something that you think is like a red flag is crazy. It is so important not just engage, but also I would even say listen to. Here's a couple of reasons why. One, now I assume we're talking to Christian parents, right?
Yes, primarily.
So one is you're better than that.
Yeah.
You're the light. And engaging in that is engaging in something that God is not moving you toward. Okay, so just recognize that. Also, it's not productive. All it does is rile people up, and half the stuff you might hear is not even true, or maybe it's perspective, or maybe there's other factors there that you just aren't aware of that don't necessarily even apply. So, and also, it always gets back to the teacher.
Wow.
There's always someone in that private chat group that snaps a picture of it and emails it over, or the teacher hears about it. And so all that does is it just makes trust fragile in that relationship. That's all it does. Yeah, and so that'd be my first tip. Really don't engage in that gossip.
That's huge, the gossip. And just an example for the listener, and me and Meghan were talking about this the other day of the gossip of a bunch of parents talking about, teachers that, older kids have had. Like, this teacher has a reputation that they're not good with boys. Like they're really great with girls. And it forces us to go into the school year already having something identified on the teacher that we don't know, right? And so we do our best, but
we try to look at each year and each person and each teacher, freshly every year, right? And there may be some things that have happened, right? There's going to be problems, there's going to be mistakes that happen on all ends, right? And so, but to look with a fresh perspective at each person and not just hold something that you heard against them that you don't even know the context or you don't even know if it's true. I think that's important for your kids to learn also. I think sometimes you talked about when you learn who your teacher is for the year and sometimes it's whatever. And trying to stay even keel of this is your teacher. We are so excited to partner with your teacher this year. Mommy and daddy, we want to be a team with your teacher this year, And so I think that's it's such a good tip and a reminder.
Yeah. Your kids know you and they will take their cues from you. Yeah. Something to think about when you're thinking about kind of where your heart is with that.
Because that's a good point. Because if we're talking about our teachers in general, because right now, school's about to start, we don't know our teachers just yet. But the conversation's already being said of I wish we have this person. And even my kids say, I don't want this person. We as parents can either feed into that and cause more dysfunction when school starts, or we can we can leverage that as a teaching moment. How would you handle that situation if, there is a reputation for different teachers and your kids themselves prefer one or the other and they didn't get the one they wanted? What would you say to the kid? How can we help our kids?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's happened. I mentioned my kids are, 14 and 17.
Yeah.
But sometimes I bring it back to them and ask them some questions. How would you feel if someone felt like that about you?
Oh, wow.
There are some people, I'm sure, that maybe don't like you also, right? And so I'd relate it back to them. How would you want that person? Would you want them to give you a chance? Would you want them to have those preconceived ideas that like you have? Or would you like for them to be open? Because maybe what they're saying about you, what they think about you, or what they judged on you isn't necessarily what's true. See, we tend to judge people by their actions, but we don't judge ourselves by that same standard. We judge ourselves by our intent. And we don't know there's intent. And so in the lack of information, most people will go kind of, low. They'll go negative, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's super important to kind of, assume positive intent.
Yeah.
I think, but when you're talking about partnering with your teacher, I think, I think only gossip does is erode. And so if you want to build trust and you want to partner with your teacher, I think, stay away from that.
Yeah. So parents listening, don't be in that circle of other parents spreading those things. And that's such a good point, is because, my kids are known, they have a reputation for different reasons at school, and some are great, some are not so great. I would hate for a teacher, for my oldest who's going into 5th grade this year, I'd hate for a teacher to already have his mind made up of him because of some stuff he did in 2nd or 3rd grade.
Yeah.
That's not fair, right?
Sure.
And
Right.
so that's such a good point for us to keep in mind as parents when we're partnering. And other than it getting back to not only the teacher, but does it get back to the other teachers and the school and like the group? Is that something that,
Of course, yeah.
yeah,
Of course,
that y'all talk about?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's something I tell the teachers too. Don't engage in the gossip. Absolutely. But here's the thing. You're first a follower of Christ, right? You're the light.
Yeah.
Be the light.
Yeah.
Be the light. When you see it happening, shine light into there.
Yeah.
Don't engage into the darkness. Be the light.
Yeah.
Good.
That's really good.
Yeah.
I imagine being the person on that screenshot that gets back to the teacher, and then the next month they find out like you're at this church function or you're doing this thing, and
Or you share Christ with them.
and they're like,
Didn't you gossip about me?
didn't you run your mouth on me?
Yeah.
Like, it just
Right?
that's that's powerful right there in and of itself. We can be done here and move on. But what's some other tips?
Here's what I'd say. When, not if, there's a problem, commit right now, knowing that there's going to be a problem, commit right now to talk directly to the person for which you have the problem. Or let it go. One of the two. I mean, you have a choice.
Wow.
So if something's going on and it bothers you, you can choose to let it go. And if you do let it go, then that means you have to let it go. Like you really, it can't come up months later and keep coming up. And if it does, then that's an indication that you can't let it go. And if you can't let it go, my advice would be then to talk directly to that person. So let me kind of illustrate this. Let's say you've got something's happening with a teacher and there's a problem of some sort. My question to you would be, if you were in that person's shoes and someone felt like this about you, what would you want them to do? I'm assuming you'd probably want them to talk to you about it, right?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what everybody wants, but that's not what everybody does.
Yeah.
So it's a blind spot. It's a blind spot. We want other people to do that to us, but we're not always willing to do that to other people. And so here's the thing, though. Let's say someone did come to you and talk to you. How would you feel about that person? Would you respect them for that?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have more respect, I think.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah, sure you would.
And, there's so many variables, too, like tone and how
Of
they
course.
go about
Now, if they
it.
came at you all hot, I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
But at the very least, you'd be happy to know.
Yeah.
But if they came to you and they talked to you in a kind but assertive way, like you would appreciate that.
Yeah.
You would appreciate knowing.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for the teachers. The teacher's not going to think less of you. They're going to respect the fact that you came to them. So with your problem, and what happens almost always is that we find that it's just a miscommunication.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, the parent can't possibly see how this would be okay. But then when they talk to the teacher, they go, oh, okay, yeah, no, that is okay. I totally see how that kind of shook out. But, and you know what? Even if you leave the conversation choosing to disagree, you know what? We agree to disagree. That's okay. Our culture kind of thinks that we all have to agree, otherwise we can't like each other. But we can have a relationship and still disagree,
Yeah.
and that's healthy. There's nothing wrong with that. So my second tip would be, when, not if there's a problem, go talk to that person or let it go.
I'm gonna put you on the spot, Meghan. Have you
Yes.
ever had to go to the teacher for anything?
You know what? I have not gone to a teacher, but I have always advocated for Logan. So mostly our son, who's now 12. Riley's not in school yet, but I have advocated for him to go and speak when there's an issue. And so ever since he was little, I've talked to him, or Joe and I have talked him through, like, okay, this is how you go, and you talk to your teacher, and if you feel like this is an issue, like, and so that actually has worked really well for us, because he's learned to voice like things that maybe he's struggling with.
Yeah.
Maybe some miscommunications, and we've seen that serve him well now that he's gotten into junior high. And I've never really had to step in much. There's been some other things, with students and stuff that I've had to like reach out to a counselor and stuff like that. But I've never had to like, go and like air a grievance to a teacher or anything like that. But
Yeah.
mostly it's because I've wanted Logan to like learn how to talk. And I feel like the tips you're giving are just like, these are practical life advice that all of
Yeah.
us should know. You know what I
Everybody,
mean? But
yeah.
it's good. It's so good for people to remember, because it is emotional, right?
We forget it
Yeah.
because I think what happens is there's three kind of levels in your brain, right? So you've got reasoning, and then when stress hits, you lose that.
Yeah.
And you move to kind of like a strictly kind of emotional state. And if enough stress hits, you lose that.
Yeah.
And you move to what's called the lizard brain. It's your brain stem.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
your fight or flight.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, and again, just like I said, that's why I start off by saying this is emotional. And when
Yeah.
you're feeling stress, it can be really easy to kind of lose that logical thinking. You can see it easily with someone else, but it's hard to see for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm saying, right? Like when things are, that's why I'm talking about this now, so that when things are good, if you've made those commitments already, you're more likely to be able to do that. By the way, I love that you do that with Logan. We do the same thing with our kids.
Yeah.
And I think, you can solve almost all problems a lot of times like that. And we even did that when my kids were in elementary. But you know what? There may be some times where you might need to go and have a conversation.
Sure. Yeah,
and there have been
absolutely.
times when my wife and I did after she tried. But this was helpful to go and talk straight to them.
Yeah. What would you say to the parent who, they want to talk to the teacher, they feel like they should. It's beyond just letting my kid do it. Like, I have to have a conversation with my teacher, but I'm afraid that if I confront or if there's confrontation, the teacher's going to treat my kid differently.
Okay.
What
I get that a lot. I think that's a natural kind of human thing to feel, right? A couple of thoughts. One, just like I asked a few minutes ago, how would you want other people to approach you? You said I'd want them to come talk to me, and I would respect them for that.
Yeah.
The teacher is the same way. Okay, so, and that's just human to human, right? The other thing I would say too is the teacher's a professional. Give them the opportunity to be that professional. It is impossible for a teacher to handle a problem they have no idea exists. They just can't.
Yeah.
So you have to, I think, at least give them the opportunity to try to address your problem. And I think if you've done that, and then there's and you're still not satisfied, I think there's the opportunity then to maybe go and reach out to the principal or assistant principal or someone kind of on the leadership staff that could help you
Gotcha.
with this issue.
Gotcha. That's so good. What else? Some more tips.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's also important to when you're talking to someone. You kind of mentioned a minute ago, said the way they approach me would matter.
Yeah.
But so I think if something happens and you feel like you need to go talk to them, I think it's okay to give yourself a little space, a little time.
Yeah.
To kind of maybe get some perspective. And I know that there's times, just like you mentioned in life, where I felt like maybe I felt emotional about something, or that maybe it could be mad, or it could be concerned, deeply concerned, or whatever it is,
Right.
But giving myself some time, a day or so, to just kind of like get some perspective, let the emotion fade a little bit, helps me to understand kind of where am I? There's been plenty of times where in my life where I did something maybe in my anger that I wasn't proud of, but there's also been plenty of times when, because I learned from that, where I waited and then I was glad I didn't do what I was thinking 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Or send that email that I wrote out but didn't put anybody's address on.
Yeah.
So I think along with that, giving yourself a little bit of time is just always assuming the best intentions.
Yeah, that's good.
You have to assume that their intentions are good. I mean, look, this person is there to try to make a difference, and you have to assume that whatever it was that happened, they did it with the best intent. And that's how we judge ourselves. We try to judge ourselves by our intentions, but we don't know other people's intentions unless they tell us. And so if you go in there and you're assuming that their intention was pure, you will approach them differently than you will if you assume their intention is evil. You know, when you go in there, you start thinking their intention is pure, you might start to have, instead of maybe mad, maybe you're curious, right? Instead of angry, maybe there's compassion, you know. So maybe giving yourself a little time helps you to get to that point. So when you have that conversation, it's very productive and the partnership is strengthened.
Not broken.
Not broken. Because again, what makes a relationship functional is how you handle the problems. The problems are an opportunity to deepen that relationship.
That's really good. And one of the rules that we have, me and my wife, is anytime there's an email or something that we need to respond back to a teacher or even the counselor this last year, we had a few things, is she's not allowed to send an email or I'm not allowed to send an email without us reading it. And so I got to read it out to her. She's got to read it out to me. And there's been several times where she'll read it and I'm like, that comes off super aggressive. So let's tone that back a little bit. And she's done it with me too. And that's been helpful for us. And then there's times where like she'll write the email and it never gets sent, just like you said. You know, just to have that time.
Made her feel better.
Yeah, it just made her feel better in that moment. But then we realized like there's more to the story. And so we had to adjust and move for that. Really, really good. Any other tips?
You know, I think with email, email should always be happy or neutral.
Good. Yeah.
I think if it's not going to be happy or if it's not going to be neutral, pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Your tone is 35% of your communication. Your body language is 65%, and the words you say is like 8%, something like that.
Yeah.
And that's all an email is. They apply the tone to it. So if it's not happy or neutral, I'd say give them a call at the very least.
Yeah. Give them a call or go
meet.
Go meet. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So for teachers, say we have an issue or stuff goes on, what's too much communication? Like, can you communicate too much and partner with your teacher? Can you email? Meghan emails like every week to the teachers. No, I'm kidding. But like, what's too much? Is there a balance that we should be going after? Should we leave them alone? And then obviously, like, teachers get grace. They didn't respond to me right away. Well, the other flip side of that, we've had teachers email us at like 1 a.m. I'm like, why are you emailing us this late? Like, you need to be in sleep because you got to get up the next day. But what are some in that you see? It's like, what's some healthy boundaries there?
I think that's something you work out with that teacher.
Okay. That's good.
It's just like any relationship. You've got to sit down and work that out. And your situation and your child is very different than someone else's situation and their child. So I think if you're wondering that, I think that's a good conversation to have with a teacher. You know, at the beginning of the year, say, "Hey, let's talk about my kid. Here are my concerns. Here are the things I think, you know, that you need to know, and I want to keep an active communication. Like, what should that look like? You know, and that you can have that conversation with them. A lot of teachers will send things out weekly, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
You talked about timely. Everyone has a different definition on that. Especially in our world today, people expect almost immediate responses. What I tell folks is a golden standard is 1 business day. I tell them 1 business day. And sometimes, you know what, we'll take that business day on purpose because emotions.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, it's healthy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably healthy to do that. Just like in our marriages. Like I mentioned, I've been married 26 years,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes we have to just, let's take a knee.
Yeah, because you just said for us to take time, maybe the teachers need to take, because we're
Sometimes.
humans.
And sometimes they're not maybe elevated, but they may interpret that you're elevated. And you know what? Let's wait until tomorrow and I'll respond back to them.
That's good.
I usually counsel my teachers to not respond at 1 a.m. and those
Yeah.
kind of things, because then you start creating expectations, those kind of things. But here's the thing, again, these people are inspirational people,
Yeah.
right? Like they're in this to like push the world and make a dent.
Yeah.
And they want to be there. They want to be there for you.
Yeah.
And they don't want this stuff to linger. So I get that. I get that. So in their zeal and desire to do what's best for your kid and for your family, sometimes they'll do those kind of things. And sometimes it's good and healthy, and sometimes it can create other problems. But
That's good.
I do think you just need to work that out with the teacher.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So, partner with anything else, Meg?
Well, I was just going to say, we started junior high this year, and we realized learning how to communicate with all the different teachers was a little bit of a challenge at the beginning of the year, you know what I mean? And so we had to be real patient in like, okay, this teacher does it through this, and this teacher does it through that. And but that was hard for Logan to learn. And so I think setting the pace and the tone as a parent of like, okay, we will figure it out. Like, they want to communicate with us. They want to help you, buddy. They want,
Yeah.
we're just going to we're going to be patient and let it ride a little bit and see what happens. And then eventually it was like, okay, he got it. He understood how they communicated and how he needed to approach them. But it's like when you have, now you've gone from 1 or 2 teachers to 6 teachers.
Yeah.
It's just a different thing.
But what an incredible skill for Logan to learn, how to communicate to lots of different types of people,
Right.
even people that are very different from him.
Yeah, we try to instill that, and we've not done it
That's
perfectly. But I mean, it started, in kindergarten where we were getting all the emails because he was so crazy. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, we're gonna have to set a tone with teachers here because we had to learn how to
Yeah.
communicate back with a frustrated teacher. Rightfully so, because Logan was like a nutball. He was crazy.
No.
And so it was interesting just to learn, and help teach him how to be a student and then learn how to communicate with people.
Yeah.
We certainly don't do it
Yeah.
perfectly, but it's been good for him to be able to learn how to do
Yeah.
it himself.
Fantastic. Those tips, recap, drop the gossip, and be light in the middle of those parent groups too. You can definitely miss that. If you can definitely get caught up in that as a parent easily because it is emotional. Second tip, what'd you say was?
When, not if there's a problem. Go directly to the person for which you have a problem,
Yeah.
or let it go.
Yeah. And most of the time, it's okay to let it go.
Right.
Sing the song. Number 3, what was your third tip?
Always assume the best intentions.
Yeah. That's huge. A lot of times we just think that they're just sitting there just on behind the keyboard or whatever. But it's not reality. But we work up this in our mind, and we got to fight back. And the last one.
And it's good to recognize that, by the way,
Yeah.
that that's a story you're telling yourself
Yeah.
that may not be reality.
Yeah.
It's good to recognize that. And sometimes time will give you a little perspective on that.
Yeah. That's good.
Good, man.
Good tips. Let's shift gears. So, as believers, so most of our listeners are believers. One of the things me and my wife try to do, and we know that teachers, we get feedback quickly from teachers that receive it, and some are like, no. But we have our parent-teacher meeting, and I try to go to, and I do as much as I can at the school because there's not a lot of dads around, but I have the flexibility to be able to do it. But one of the things we always say to our teachers is, if you have a kid in your class who needs supplies, if you have a kid in your class who needs extra help or whatever, or as the teacher, if you have something that you need, either it's supply, whatever it is, would you reach out to us? We want to help you have a successful classroom. And we've had teachers where they take us up on it, and we've helped and done different stuff because we want to be the light for them, but we also want to bless all those kids that are in the class. But some teachers have been, that's kind of weird. As believers, what are some things as Christians that we can help in our public schools like that you've seen that's been helpful, that's not weird, or like that teachers will take and receive? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what you're asking, I think, is how can the parents what actions can the parents do that would kind of
Yeah.
shine Jesus' light in there?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say first, I think that's a question to ask God.
Hmm.
When you're praying and you're talking to God, I think asking Him, the Spirit will reveal that to you, or you'll start to see where you can help. So I think our perspective, like a lot of times when we see a situation, different people see different needs. So it's hard for me to say, oh, here's the one way,
Gotcha. Yeah.
right? Because God uses us all very, very differently. And the problems I tend to see aren't the same problems that maybe you tend to see. Maybe we're all looking at the same
Yeah.
situation. So I do think that you have to pray and ask God for that first and be open to being led by that. I think as far as like what you mentioned, as far as like supplies or trying to provide for maybe someone that needs some basic things, I think connecting with a counselor is a good way to do that. The way we do that at my school is some parents will come to us and ask those kind of things. And so the counselor will go with them because that is private, that we can't share.
Yeah.
Right.
So we don't even want you to know which class they're in.
Yeah.
So we'll connect you with a counselor. You can buy supplies or backpacks or pencil packets or clothes or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And but the counselor will be very in tune to or the counseling team, in my school's case, it's a large school, will be very in tune to what are our needs that we need, and then they'll be able to distribute that as needed.
Yeah.
So I really think that's probably a good way to go with that.
Yeah. And I think what you just said of taking the time for parents to pray and ask God, like, how can our family be light here is, Meg, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if many parents are doing that.
Yeah.
They're just trying to figure out stuff.
In James it says, you don't have because you don't ask.
Hmm.
And sometimes you ask, but you don't have because you ask with the wrong intention. You want to satisfy your own pleasures.
Yeah.
But I think if you're surrendered and you're going to Christ and you're surrendered and you're like, use me, He will.
Yeah.
He will.
Definitely.
And that can be money. That could be time.
Yeah.
But it is about who you are and who you're being. Not so much about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Doing is important. Don't be wrong. I'm not trying to minimize doing.
Yeah, yeah.
But really, what you do should be an overflow of who you are.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Megan, anything else?
That's also
Yeah.
good. Like,
Yeah.
it's been good just for me to even hear and
Yeah.
just kind of soak that in and go home and really process.
I know.
Okay, how is my family really doing those things and going to the Lord before the school year? Not just praying for Logan or Riley as they go to school, but being sort of that mission field of the school and where our kids are and with the friends and the teachers. And that's a community, like a lot of the kids, they're growing up, for many grades with those people. And so just really asking the Lord, that's just such a good reminder.
Yeah, what an opportunity for us as believers, specifically speaking into the public school system. That's why had you on. Is a lot of times we just think, well, public school, and I'll ask you this last question: the public school, we're taking God out of school, can't do anything. But as believers, to bring light into darkness or to be the salt, we can. It just looks different for each one of us because God wants to use us individually as a family, but as parents with these teachers. And the other thing that you just said that it convicted me in this moment as we're talking, Ronnie, is I don't know if I've ever prayed for my kids' teachers. Thinking about that of
It's time to start.
I know, I'm convicted right now of man,
Yeah.
I didn't what an opportunity. If a parent wants to partner with their teachers and they can't do anything the tips that you just gave, all that, we can pray for them, right?
Right.
And that in and of itself is a powerful tool for us as Christians as we get ready for school. Last question for you, Ronnie. Sure. You got kids. You've going through the school system, and you've been an educator for so long. As raising yourself, switching hats from principal to dad, as a dad, what are some things you've done for your kids to encourage them to be Christians, to be themselves, to be light in the darkness, but also follow guidelines and rules of the school and be respectful. How have you, as a dad, been able to encourage them?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. So this is me switching from principal to parent.
Yeah.
Sure. You mentioned the guidelines. Guidelines for the kids, they're mostly behaviors. So they're things like don't interrupt or don't distract while the teacher's speaking, respect, etc. But kids can talk about Jesus. Some of those, I think, guidelines that you might be referring to are really more about the teacher and what they're saying to the kids. But kids can definitely talk about Jesus. So, before I answer this, let me also just kind of make sure, just kind of first say a couple of things. Make sure we have my assumptions that I have are known.
Yeah.
And that is, I really believe that what I'm about to say, the assumptions are that the parent, it must first surrender daily to Jesus. And be consistently present for their kids in order to have these conversations in a way that encourages them. If you, the kids, your kids, they know what you value. And if your heart is not in the right place, they know that, right? So if you're trying to have these conversations and you've never spent any of the time with them, or you haven't surrendered yourself to Jesus, it's not going to encourage them. It's going to actually do the opposite. It's going to push them away, right? So keep that in mind. Everything is framed in relationship. Okay, so I think those are my assumptions. Okay,
right.
So all right. So the question was, how do I encourage the kids to stand up for themselves as Christians, but follow the guidelines? So I've mentioned this already, but I do think the light shines best and brightest in the darkness. This is why I love public school. There are people that would never be in my circles except for public school. And also, this particular area, Katy, being so close to the energy corridor, some of the best medical professionals in the world, there are people from all over the world here.
Yeah.
And so, we have, 30-something languages at my school alone.
Wow.
Like, that's crazy.
And Katy ISD has like 90 or something like,
And so, what an opportunity to be a light. And the light shines best in the darkness. I want my kids to encounter these things, particularly when they're still open to talking to me about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that way we can have those conversations, right, as they come up.
Yeah.
But if I don't allow them that opportunity, we won't ever have those conversations. Or if we do have those conversations, they're disconnected from action, and it doesn't make much sense,
Yeah.
So that's one. Everything also for my kids have both given their life to Christ. And in my life, and in their lives, again, we've surrendered this, that this is God doing this in us. But everything is framed with the relationship with Jesus. Right? So the relationship with Jesus kind of is the lens for lots of things. So really, my kids are kind of like missionaries. They've, at school, led others to Christ. They've gotten teachers to come to church. My daughter one time came home and was upset as a high schooler. She's going to be a senior next year, but she's been in high school for a while now. And she was being made fun of by some other girls because of her relationship with Jesus, because of righteousness that was in her life. And so these girls were making fun of her for that, and they were purposely not including her, and because of her relationship with Jesus. And so she really came home, and she was like upset about this, and was like, "Yeah, hey, these kids are not including me, right?" And so she was really discouraged by this. And so I said, "Congratulations." She's like, "What?" "Congratulations." And I was like, "Congratulations. Not everybody gets that honor." And she's like, "What?" And I was like, Jesus himself says that you are blessed if you are made fun of, or if, in this case, people are not including you. So if you're persecuted for him or for righteousness, you're blessed. So, wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so she started talking a little bit about these girls, and I was like, how can you pray for these girls? What is it we can do to kind of pray for this? And so she didn't really say much back at that time. But I noticed that in the coming weeks, she leaned more into Jesus. She didn't pull away.
Wow.
And what she did is she found other friends that were and still tried to stay open and loving to these friends.
Yeah.
Just because they disagreed didn't mean that she couldn't have a relationship with them, but they didn't necessarily have to be in her inner circle either. So really, in my thoughts as a parent, it's really less about standing up for yourself, because God does that.
Yeah.
Right? And it's more about who you are and what are you being. So we go back to, who are you? And are you being that? So
Yeah.
there's a book that has been helpful for my wife and I. And by the way, I love talking about this. I could talk about this. This could be a whole nother podcast.
Oh yeah.
It might
But
be.
Have you
there's
on again,
there's
for
a
sure.
book called Spiritual Milestones that we came across back when they were babies. And I wish I could remember the author. But this book really helped. It's kind of like a reference book almost, but really helped us to kind of like think about milestones. I know our church embraces the idea of milestones, but think about these milestones and how we intentionally do some of these things, not just all the time as far as like who you're being, because the Bible talks about guarding your heart and your mind, and how God's peace can do that, right? And God's peace is a result of surrender. But it's this book kind of helped us to kind of figure out how do we do this intentionally, just kind of in the day-to-day as far as who we are, but also maybe even creating some events that highlighted some milestones in their lives, or milestones that may come up in their lives. And then there's other resources that we used along the way that kind of helped us with that. So whenever these kinds of things came up, we could go back and reference some of that kind of that intentional teaching that we were kind of doing with them.
Yeah. So good. It's, we always say, as the primary faith trainers of our kids, we can't pour out of something that's empty. And so if my heart isn't showing and loving and living for Jesus, and then I'm going to just tell my kid, you need to go in school and be Jesus, but my life they're going to see right through that, which is an amazing statement. And so many parents that, I've come across a lot in the past few years of like, we need to send our kids with, it was from T-shirts to tracks to bracelets, all these things that we can send, that the church needs to support and send into school so that we can. The greatest tool is to send a kid who has parents who are living it out, modeled at home, and then they're doing it too. We don't need gimmicks. Jesus doesn't need us to do all these things. He needs us to be who he's made us to be. Yeah. And that's a huge statement, man. That's so good. Ronnie, thanks for your time. We'll need to get you back on to talk through all of this stuff. Meghan, how can people access the resources we have for back to school stuff?
Yeah, best way to do it is just to go to empoweredhomes.org, and you can go to back to school. You can search back to school, and you can find this podcast and a bunch of other podcasts that we're going to do in this series, and a lot of other resources for back to school to help you just navigate and find a good rhythm as you're going back to school. Yeah,
we got lots of great resources. We got old resources too. You can comb through some back to school conversation starters, some back to school game planning. We got all kinds of fun stuff on there. So, Ronnie, thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight. And what an honor, man. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me here. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, so you can access all of this at empoweredhomes.org. Be sure, if you are listening on Spotify, Apple, whatever, leave us a comment. We get more traction the more comments we get. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, make a comment, do all that stuff. Google likes that. So thank you guys for being here. What a great episode.
Thank you. It was awesome.